The first Rashi in the Parsha had cited Chazal. We find that Hashem continuously counts us. Why does he count us continuously? Mitoich tiboson mona osam kol shor. It's an expression of his love that he has for us. That's why he continuously counts us. And he gives examples. When they left Egypt, he counted us to know how many Jews were left. When he came to bring about that his Shechina should dwell in the midst, Bechad b'Nisan hu kama Mishkan, Bechad b'Yamanon. First in Nisan, the Mishkan was erected, and Bechad b'Yamanon, which is right now. This is this parsha. So he says, what does counting indicate? The continuous counting? Chiboson. We find there's a pasuk later in Bamidbar, where one pasuk, the word Bnei Yisrael is mentioned, the words 5 times. Bnei Yisrael, we know how careful the Torah is. Every word, even a letter, if the Torah adds a letter, it's added because it's significant, because the Torah is indicating something special. But if it could somehow allude to it, rather than say it explicitly, it alludes to it. But yet, in one pasuk, it mentions the words Bnei Yisrael 5 times. We find that the story of Eliezer Eved Avram, when he was appointed to find a wife for the future matriarch of Klal Yisrael, the wife of Yitzchok, the story is mentioned 3 times. And the Chazal asked the question, Rashi cites the Chazal, but the Rabbi Akiva uses very strong terminology. He says, how much ink has been spilt on this story? How many quills have been broken to record the story? What's so significant about the story of Eliezer Eved Avram negotiating a wife for Yitzchok with Besuel and with Lavan? So that's the takeaway, to teach us that sichas avdei avos have greater value than Torah Shalbanim, whatever that means. That just the ordinary talk, the way the avdei avos, the way they express themselves, have greater value than what? Than Torah Shalbanim, than the Torah. Why? Because the law of that the blood of a sheretz is contaminates, is alluded to through a vav, an extra vav. And here the Torah speaks at length the story of Eliezer Avram negotiating for the wife of Yitzchok. So the Torah is very careful. And yet in one pasuk, the Torah mentions the words Bnei Yisrael 5 times. So Rashi cites Chazal because it's connected Chamisha Chumshei Torah. Just as the 5 Chamashim are 5 books, so the words Bnei Yisrael mentioned 5 times corresponds to the Chamisha Chumshei Torah. What does that mean? What is the innate specialness of the Jew? What is it? The world only exists for one reason. Bereshis bara Elokim yishamayim v'soretz b'shvil Torah shenikras reishis b'shvil Yisrael shenikras reishis. The world was created for the Jewish people. Why? Because they're the only nation who have relevance to the Torah itself. And if you succeed within that context, then the world has value. If not, the world has no value. As a result of that, why are the Jews so special? Why does Hashem favor the Jews? Why is the focus always the Jew? Because the Jew himself is the only one who gives value to existence. Existence wouldn't exist if not for the Jew. That's the specialness. That's the chashivus. That's the innate specialness of the Jew. As a result of that, there's chibah, there's love. The Jew is held on a pedestal because the value of the Jew to Hashem, because the Jew plays a role which the nations of the world don't play that role. So the continuous counting. When we left Egypt, why didn't we leave Egypt? For Kabbalah Torah. To go to Sinai. So he's counting them because this people, they're the ones who are only qualified to receive the Torah at Sinai, which is the ultimate objective of creation. And how many Jews were there? We spoke about Shishim Ribo, Gvorim Malamichov, 600,000 males above the age of 20. That number was the critical mass. Until that number was reached, we didn't leave Egypt. I mentioned at that time, the Rabbeinu Bachri asked a question. The most special family that ever existed was Yaakov and his children. The Shiftei Bo. Why did Hashem give the Torah to Yaakov and his children? Well, the Shivim Nefesh, the 70 individuals went to Egypt together with Yaakov. Why was the Torah given to them? So Rabbeinu Bachri says because there's a number, 600,000 males above the age of 20, that's the critical mass. That's the number that has to be achieved. So now when we leave Mitzrayim, Hashem counts us to show that number is there. As a result of that, now we're ready for real time. Now we have the ascent. We're on the ascent. Kabbalah Torah. That's the whole concept of what? Of the Yimei Sfira. We're counting. We're counting towards Kabbalah Torah. What happens now when that number is minimized? Hashem counts us over again. Because again, the Jews themselves have that special value because the world exists only because of them, because they're the only ones that have relevance to Torah. So therefore, that's the chiboson. People say, why? Why is the Jew so special? Because Jew has a innate value, has a capacity, a capability to bring about things which nations don't. Proof of the pudding is they turned down the Torah at Sinai when Hashem offered it to them. We're the only ones who said Nasim Nishma. Not only did we not ask what is it all about, we said we accept unequivocally, and whatever it is, we want to do your will. So it's a whole different dimension of understanding of what our value is versus what the nation's value, nations, the world values. Therefore, we have the continuous counting. And then the Torah says here, which we read yesterday, they were counted according to the paternal line. Pasuk Gimel, those who were counted from the age of 20 and above, Kol Yotzitzot B'Yisrael, those who were eligible for the conscription, Tifkudu Osam, they should be counted. Litziv Osam Atavaro. According to their numbers, you and Aaron. Rabbi, 1 second. So over here, there's a Balaturim. The Balaturim says when we counted in Parshas Kisisa, after the Chet Egel, Aaron is not mentioned. Aaron was not involved in the counting. You and Aaron here should count them. So he says, why they weren't they counted? So he explains, Lucia Aaron, Bosa Minyon. Aaron did not participate in that counting. Bosa Minyon, Vishal Yodud Nasa Egel. Shibishvilo Hutskul Minyon. Lochen Lo Manabu. Why did they have to be counted? Because of the Egel. Now, who participated in the Egel? Even though Aaron, as it says explicitly, did not even consider Moshe not being alive. But since he had participated in terms of gathering the gold, building the Mizbeach for the Egel, therefore, he had a degree of like culpability there, therefore he's not including the counting. Here the counting is unrelated to the Chet. Therefore, Aaron is a participant, participates in the counting. Rashi cites Rav Yitzchok. Why does the Torah begin with creation? So the Maral explains, what is the Torah? The Torah is a compilation of laws. To start with, the first mitzvah that was given to Klal Yisrael is the sanctification of the new moon. What do we have all this background information? Hashem created the world and the whole story. Why? To tell us that God is the creator, and there were many nations that existed, and God had given these lands to them. And when they sinned, he destroyed them and destroyed the world. And God gives and God takes. Because what's going to be in the future? The world, the nations of the world are going to say that the Jews are interlopers. They came to Canaan and they destroyed the 7 nations of Canaan and they took the land. How do they have a right to take? The answer is because God is the creator and God determines who has and who doesn't have. God gives and God takes. Therefore, the Torah begins with the story of creation. And all the stories, the story of the Mabul, the generation of the dispersion of the nations, all this. So the obvious question is, go tell it to the Muslim. Go tell it to the communist. Go tell it to the heretic. They said it's irrelevant what your book says. Our book says differently. The answer is we should know we have the right. If we question our right, what our relevance to Eretz Yisrael is, then we have a problem. It's irrelevant what the world thinks. That the Torah begins, that Hashem is the creator, God is the sole opinion, he determines who has, who doesn't have. Why are we here? Because he said so. That's it. Why are we special? Because we're the only ones who have relevance to the Torah. But who says the world is all about the Torah? Or even the Jew may say it. It's irrelevant what you think or what you may understand. It's what Hashem says. Your value is this. And if you don't have that value, then I don't continue maintaining creation. God put the mountain over our heads. Im tukablu Torah mutav. Accept Torah, fine. If not, the world reverts back to pre-existence. Because the value of Torah, the world is only the playing field, the setting for the challenges of the Torah. And if you have no interest in that, then God says, I have no interest in creation, in maintaining existence. So it's for us, it's not for the world. The world are only bystanders. They buy into it, fine. They don't buy into it, it's irrelevant whether they buy into it or not. Moshe and Aaron, it was even the heads of each of the tribes. V'itchem yu ish lamater. Each person based on the tribe. Ish rosh levei savosafi. Who each person who's the head of the tribe. And then it goes in, it delineates who are the Nisim, who are the heads of the tribes, and the Shmos Anoshim, Sheyamdu Itchem, L'Ruven, Shneur, and it goes and enumerates all the various Nisim, the princes. And then go down to Tezayin, Elo Krue Eidor, Nisim Matasavosam. These are the ones who were called whenever there was any issue regarding the relevant things that have relevance to Klal Yisrael. They were the princes, Rashi Alpha Yisrael. They were the leaders of the myriads of Jews. Rashi says, any issue of great importance that had to be discussed, what had to be communicated, they were there. They represented the tribes. And all the congregation that he gathered, on Rosh Chodesh of the second month, that was the month of Iyar, what does it mean? And they were established, the birth was based upon their relevance to the families. So Rashi over here cites Chazal. They brought their documents of pedigree, and testimony regarding their birth. So each one should be identified with his pedigree, that he's from that particular paternal line. Which tribe? And to make the point, the Yisrael Mishposam. So here there's a Sefarno. Why was it important they should be of the special pedigree? So if you look in the Sefarno, these people are the ones who are qualified to go to war, to go to battle. It's to maintain their yichus, their pedigree. It is very important. In life, why do you succeed? Why is pedigree so important? Because like says the merit of the family, of the forefathers, assists them to succeed in life. That if a person was conscripted and he was recorded among the soldiers of the king, you didn't have to check his pedigree. You know he was definitely a kosher Jew. He was not illegitimate. Because a person was an illegitimate Jew, if he had some kind of stain on his pedigree, he was not eligible to be conscripted. So Ka'amram, Sheina Shechina, quotes the Gemara Kedushin, Sheina Shechina Shora Elo al Mishpros HaMiyachosas B'Yisrael. The Shechina only dwells only among the families that are of that special pedigree. If there's no pedigree, there's illegitimacy, whatever it is, the Shechina is not there. The Shechina only has relevance to where the pedigree is. So therefore, we have to establish the pedigree of each of the tribes, because we're about to go into Canaan, and we have to have a standing army, and therefore, you have to have that degree of pedigree, because the Shechina only has relevance to Mishpachos HaMichosas B'Yisrael. Okay? So over here, I always mention the Yalkut, the Gemara says in Shabbos, that Hashem, before he gave the Torah to Klal Yisrael, he went and went Avodah Zarah. He offered it to the nations of the world. Each one turned it down. And when he offered us, we said, Nasa v'nishma. That's the word in Shabbos. However, the Midrash says, the Yalkut says that Hashem never offered it to the nations of the world. And after he offered it to us, and we said, Nasa v'nishma, they came with a complaint, and they said, why don't you offer it to us? Why weren't we eligible to be off the Torah? So Hashem says, my children, they come of pure pedigree. You people are all of incestuous and adulterous relationships. And because you're all illegitimate, you have no relevance to having that relationship with me. Therefore, I never offered you the Torah. This is the Medrash says exactly this point. That because the purity of the Jew is one of a kind, only if you have that degree of purity of pedigree, they have relevance to the Shechina, which is the Torah. Yisrael v'Raisu Kutshu Brichu Chatu, the catalyst through which, the medium through which we attach to Hashem is through the Torah itself. That spiritualizes us to be able to link, to have that, to cleave to Him. The nations of the world being illegitimate, they have no relevance to it. Therefore, Hashem says, therefore, I never gave you the Torah. For that reason, I never offered it to you. You have no relevance to it. So, when the nation heard that of the purity of the pedigree of Klal Yisrael, the Midrash quotes a pasuk from Mishlei, Kamu v'neva Yashua. The children stood up and they began extolling Klal Yisrael. They were like amazed. They didn't realize the purity of the Jewish people. They were amazed. So when it came to the Balpor, where the Jews themselves crossed lines they shouldn't have crossed, they said, now that purity has been breached. And since the purity has been breached, therefore, the Jews are no better than we are. So Hashem says, whoever breached that purity, they died in a plague. They don't exist. So the purity of the Jewish people is still at that level, is being maintained. I had mentioned, the Ramban writes that Nisim Gluyim, revealed miracles, were only during Bayeshem, Rishon. Bayeshem, there weren't any revealed miracles, except one miracle Hashem kept in place. What was that? The Sota ritual, that if a woman was suspected adulteress, where she was forewarned by the husband that she claims her innocence, she undergoes a process with the Kohen, Bnei Yisrael, and if she did commit adultery, the results are disastrous. she swells, every artery bursts, and she becomes dismembered. And the adulterer, he experiences the same fate. And if she did not commit the adultery, then if she couldn't conceive, she conceives. If she had ugly children, the children are beautiful. If her health was failing, her health becomes healthy, so on and so forth. Why? So the Ramban says, because pedigree for the Klal Yisrael is crucial and essential to have a relation with Hashem. And as a result of that, Hashem, even though we weren't worthy of the miracles, of revealed miracles as Bais Rishon, Bais Sheni, Hashem kept this in place to maintain and guarantee the purity of Klal Yisrael for that reason. Over there, when Bilam had suggested this story with the Benos Moab Bijan, they should seduce the Jewish people with Baal Peor, even though they did idolatry, but he said, Elokem Sheledu Sonazima, the God of the Jews, he does not tolerate licentiousness. And the moment they start behaving this way, it will bring out a level of wrath, they'll be destroyed. And that's why Pinchas, if he would have acted as he did, as the Zerat, as the convoy, only because Pinchas took the moment to demonstrate his zealotry, that's the only reason why Klaus survived. Otherwise, we would have been destroyed. Because if the whole value of Klaus is the Torah, and if there's that level of impurity, the Torah cannot be maintained, so what happens? The world no longer has purpose. So it's crucial and essential to maintain that level of purity, so we should have relevance to Torah for that reason. The Gemara tells us, Lo Yavu Mamzer B'Kal Hashem, person is illegitimate. He cannot marry a legitimate Jew. He's a mamzer, illegitimate, whether it's adultery, incest, whatever happened. What about a ger, like a person in the convert, to be a tzaddik? So the Gemara says a ger could marry an illegitimate. Why? Because it's a lo yovo mamzer b'kal Hashem. A mamzer cannot marry into the congregation of God. Kal gerim ein kal. The ger, although he's special, but he's not called kal. He's not called the congregation of Hashem. He doesn't have a share in the land. As a result of that, he can marry. So what do we see? Who is Kal Hashem? If there's illegitimacy, you're not Kal Hashem. This is by Yisrael al-Mishchosa. So what's Kal Hashem? When do you have relevance to Hashem? And that's why the nations of the world, the Torah wasn't even considered to be given to them for this reason. Therefore, the Yisrael al-Mishchosa, that we brought up books, documents of pedigree to prove our purity, and there was only one woman who was actually defiled, the story of Shlomis Bas Ivri, where she was raped by that Egyptian. That was the only child which was not of Jewish parentage, but every other Jew was of that pure pedigree. And this is what we're talking about here. Just ended. Moshe Rabbeinu, he had wanted to go into the land, and Hashem says he's not going to the land. So Moshe Rabbeinu says, I want to see the land. So Hashem says, ascend the mountain and you'll see the land from there. And the Chazal tell us that Hashem had performed a miracle that Moshe was able to see every inch of land in Eretz Yisrael. He wanted to see the land. So over there, the Sefarno explains that we speak about ayin tova. One who has a good eye, there's no one who had a good eye like Moshe Rabbeinu. He had the ultimate ayin tova. He wanted that his eye should come upon every inch of Eretz Yisrael, so the land should be blessed, that the Jews should maximize within the context of bracha in Eretz Yisrael. That's why he wanted to go in. That was essential why he wanted to go into the land, that his eye should look upon every bit of that land. So Hashem says, ascend the mountain, that will happen. I will allow you to see every part of the land, that your ayin tova should come upon them. So the Ramban writes later, when we were counted, it says Moshe, Aaron, and the Nesiim. That means Moshe Rabbeinu actually was there. Every Jew, like the Torah tells us, when you count for Ma'aser Behema, you tithe a flock or herd, you count 1 through 10, and the 10th one you designate, you say 10, it assumes the status of a consecrated korban. It's Ma'aser Behema. It's Gotchim Kalim. It's like a shlomi. It's a shlomi, peace offering. Do you know what it means that you should be exposed to Moshe's eye and Aaron's eye? These are the holiest Jews in the world, the holiest Jews who ever existed. When their eye came upon every Jew who passed under their gaze, it elevated them to a special level. That's the ultimate ayin tova. Like Moshe Rabbeinu's eye, when it saw the land took on a maximum capacity, positive for Klal Yisrael, to utilize that location in terms of bracha. Identically, every Jew who was exposed to the eye, to the gaze of Moshe and Aaron, immediately assumed another level of value because their eye came upon that each individual person. Okay, Chovos HaLevavos, 3rd chapter, Hakdama Chamishis, the Feldheim edition, page 382. The 5th preface. She's bar eight slow. It has to be clear to a person. All the events that take place after creation, the evolution of the world, hu b'shnei dvorim. It's due to 2 things. Gzeirus habor yisaleh, it's what God decrees. V'chefzo b'tziosem el gvul havoyo. It's a desire that he wants to bring it to fruition, to actualization. Hasheni sibsa mitzuim, mehem krovim, mehem rechokim. And other things which have relevance to what's about to take place, and other things which have relevance to a later period of time. Mehem krovim, mehem rechokim. Certain things are obvious why things are happening, and other things are concealed. We have no idea. But everything is evolving in the direction to complete what Hashem decreed, only with Hashem's involvement, Hashem's assistance. Very often, we say Gamzu Latova. What's Gamzu Latova? Initially, the way it's explained that something negative happens and we don't see the value, the positive value. But someday, maybe it'll be revealed to the person why it was in his best interest, why it happened, and it's the ultimate in the positive, not the negative. That's Gamzu Latova. And not everybody sees the Gamzu Latova. You could have gone into an investment and you did it, you were disappointed. And ultimately, you realize later it's revealed that if you would have, it would have taken you down. So now you thank Hashem that you were not brought into the deal. The Gemara Nida says, it quotes a pasuk in Tehillim, that there's a person who, God forbid, he blasphemes Hashem because he's angry. And later he praises Hashem. What's it speaking about? A person is going to catch a boat, and this sea voyage determines what his financial future will be is going to be. And on the way to the ship, a wagon breaks its axle and misses the boat. And the boat already left port. He's furious. Here, I'm a good Jew. Hashem, what are you doing to me? And then he realizes that the boat that went out from port ultimately sank it, went down at sea. So initially, he's livid to the point, he's, God forbid, cursing Hashem. And ultimately, he praises Hashem. It was Gamzu Latova that he never got on that boat. The whole story with the Titanic. The wealthiest people went on that boat. A person who was wealthy, couldn't get on the boat, he was seething with envy. Only later did he realize that he thanked Hashem that he never got on that boat. But initially, what do we understand? It's Gamzul Tova, but not always does one come to the realization why it was in his best interest. So that's where trust and faith comes into play. You believe and you have trust in Hashem, whatever happens is what is for the best. Sometimes you see it, sometimes you don't see it. But whatever happens, because Hashem decreed and willed it should be as it's happening. That's why it's happening. Because nothing could happen unless Hashem decrees that it should happen. It's interesting, just as a Jew, a believing Jew, there are many things in life we see which are painful. What's going on? The struggle between good and evil. In Israel, not even speaking of the United States, you have the left-wing element in Israel and the strife and the polarization and what's going on over there. You say, why? Why does Hashem let him vanquish the negative and empower those who are more committed to Torah? Right? Evidently, if he's not, there's a reason why not. What is the reason? Well, maybe we're not good enough. What we believe we are, maybe we're not there where we should be. Or maybe there's whatever it is. And Hashem's it's created that setting for a reason. But do you understand why? You may have an inkling why, but we don't have absolute clarity on the why. Again, this is all part of the same thing. Nothing happens. Every setting, what happens? It's happening the way it's happening because. Do you realize when the Mir Yeshiva fled Vilna, went through Russia, went to Kobe, went to Shanghai, relatively speaking, it was a small remnant of the Jews of Europe who survived the Holocaust. So you'd say, what is it? It's a pittance. These are crumbs. But you realize Torah that exists today in the world, every Torah institution, whether it was in Israel, whether it was in Europe, whether it was in the United States, the ones who founded and maintained that standard of Torah and launched it anew were the students of the Mir Yeshiva and those who were in Shanghai. That small remnant. So today that we have Torah in the world the way it is, if not for that segment, very small segment, surviving and what they went through, they didn't know yeshivas in the world. You wouldn't have observant Jews. God forbid, Jews would have assimilated. So did we understand at the time? After everything, what are you doing for us? We were beyond comatose at the time. Only God knows. Time will tell, and time does tell. Not that we understand the Holocaust, why it happened. We don't have the answer, but we don't need an answer. If God allowed it to take place, evidently, that's Dino Emes. God's the true judge. Like any time a person experiences a painful tragedy, Dino Emes, he's the true judge. That's what we talk about. This is emunah and bitochon. That's the trust in Hashem that whatever happens, it's because He decreed it should happen. Whether we understand it, we don't understand it. Whether it's you understand it immediately or ultimately understand it, or you'll never understand it.